we're going to install this LiftMaster LA500. This is the AC version, so it has a smaller housing. It is going to be put on a gate operator, or excuse me, a gate that has always been manual. So they're going to switch it over to an electromechanical gate, and we are setting up to prep the area. We're going to blow all these leaves out of the way so we're not slipping and sliding around. We have our voltage out here for our welder, and you can see that we've already prepped our cart ready to go. We have our 120 volt MIG welder, and we have all of our supplies ready to go. This is the plate that we're going to actually mount across these pickets to add some stability to the actuator arm. Got the box ready. We're going to pull the control housing out now, and this is just the prep work, the first step in putting this gate operator in this beautiful gate, this beautiful home in North Dallas. I have the housing pulled out of the box along with some of the accessories, which I've started to take apart, photo eye, and a couple other, the manual and stuff like that. So I'm going to open this up and take the control board out and mount the housing over there above that outlet. Run the have a qualified technician run the power from the bottom of the outlet into here, and then into the box and energize the box. The housing's installed. The electrical has to still get tied in. We'll have a qualified technician do that. Coming at you awful fast. So it calls for 4 screws, and I'm still not 100% sure whether it calls for taking all the control boards out or not. It's really hard to determine that from the manual. The manual shows mounting it without the control board in there, but then it doesn't give any description other than taking the expansion board out to mount it on a pole. And since we're not mounting it on a pole, then we're good. Qualified technician got the electricity hooked up, and you can see we got good incoming voltage. It's not necessarily ideal to have these on GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupt. It can cause you issues. So one thing you want to do is double check to see if you are, and you can do that with GFCI tester, and you can just plug it in and then see that you got a good circuit, which is these 2 lights. That means it's correct, and then test it. So we know that we are. So the important thing that we want to tell our customer is that if they notice the gate operator running slow or giving a beep off saying that it's a low battery, that they may want to check the circuit, any outlets on the circuit, and then they may want to check the plugs as well as the breaker. So it's just something to be cautious of. But we know that we've got one wired properly. We know we've got good voltage. Now we just need to let our customer know to be cautious about that. If a storm comes through, or if water gets on the electricity, or if there's too much moisture in the air, and all the things that can make it trip, and it does trip, that could be an issue. Ideally, you want this on an independent circuit that's not a GFCI. Welding the support bracket to the hinge post, and we're getting it level and square. Level that way, level that way. And if you've seen one of these before from the manual, you could tell that I've had to modify it. So unfortunately, the manual does not call for provision on a 4-inch post, which is probably the most common thing that we see. So I had to angle it and cut it. I'm just going to leave it just like that for now in case I've got to cut it off, and then I'll weld a support underneath it when the time comes. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it like that. That'll be pretty easy to cut off if I need to. Now we'll get the arm out and start looking at welding the support piece across the pickets and the support bracket for the front arm. As you can see, I've mounted the strap that's going across the pickets to the front support bracket, and I've got my arm level, and I've welded that support bracket, just tacked it on there. I had to notch out the back of the support bracket for the back of the actuator arm, so we could get it to work. I just notched it out with a grinder. Main thing we want to make sure is the arm is level and that it opens and closes but we got more travel in there and our gate's at 90 degrees, so, and we've got a good angle on the actuator arm. I have the photo eye reflector bracket welded. The customer is going to paint. They're going to have that repowder coated. So we just got black on there just to help prevent it from rusting. And then you can see I've got the head. Now the wire's not long enough, so I'm going to need to extend the wire and put a box down there. I'm thinking about drilling a hole down here at the bottom and running the wire for the photo eye. This is the photo eye, down through the post and down through the back and coming out of the back of that box, and then making my junction, my splice point for this cable down in the same box that we're making our actuator cable splice point, and that might make it look a little bit better. Now we're going to trench from that side over to here, and we're going to put a single gang box right there, and that's where our actuator cable will tie into. Here's what the trench looks like. Just following that line right there, and it's going to go up to here. So I've got some 3/4 inch conduit over there behind my welder, and I'll put that underneath the irrigation, then around the sorry, got out of focus, underneath this irrigation, that irrigation, then around there, and then it'll just go up the fence right there. I have the conduit installed and painted. Still got all that masking tape on there. I'll leave that till the end. I got my straps installed. I got my box installed. I just have the splice for the photo eye in there. I don't have the actuator arm splice yet, obviously, because it's not on there and it's not laying down close to it. It's down. I got it sitting down over there. Now I'm going to weld this gusset on the bottom of it, because that's sticking out there pretty far, and obviously I've weakened it by cutting this groove in it so the actuator arm could extend to close the gate. And then I'll cut this end off over here, cut this end off over here on this little horizontal bar. Finish welding, tack weld, tack weld, tack weld, tack weld, tack weld, excuse me, weld, 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 and on the top, the bottom, and then down the side, and then down the side once those pieces are cut off. And then I'll finish burning all of this in, and I may weld a little gusset off of the bottom of that too, just to give us some support. And then on this picket and maybe a couple of these other pickets, I'll put maybe a little spot weld on the back, just to add a little bit of strength. So that handles that part of it. I bought some brown paint for the fence part over there, but it actually didn't turn out to be so bad. It's not a perfect match, but it'll blend a little bit better until they get the powder coater out here and paint the parts where we welded. I have the drilled a hole through the bottom of the bracket. You can't see it. Bracket, and drilled it all the way through so the photo eye cable will not be exposed. And then I'm painting all of these brown temporarily until they get finished, and there's the box cover until we get either some touch-up paint from the powder coater, or they're just going to stay like that. It blends a little bit better. And then I've got some tabs cut off for stop plate on the gate. I'm going to weld it over here. I'm going to weld it on the gate right here, and or somewhere around here, probably match up with the hinges over there. We'll weld that on here and smooth it off and clean it up, and then that'll stop up against the latch post. And then I'll put some felt pads on there to make sure that it's quiet. I welded a gusset on this support bracket for the actuator arm, and then I welded a gusset on the support for the front part of the arm. And I'm cleaning that up, and I just cleaned this up. So hopefully that'll help. It will help compensate for the big notch that I cut out right here. So, and then I got that all welded, and then welded down there on the side and the back. It was tough to get to. I don't know if I should have mounted that box first, but I did. So that's what a modified support bracket for LA500 looks like. I had to cut that notch out of there so the arm would go back and forth. I've welded to all the pickets, welded down the side, welded all the pickets, and then welded down that side, and then I just put little tack welds all along the back to help add support. And then you can see that I've added a gusset here too. So those are pretty inconspicuous, so you really won't notice them. But I felt that it needed it for the support for a number of reasons. But okay, so that's part of the welding done. I'm going to brush this up, and all the welding part will be done on the gate for the support arm. And then now I just need to weld a couple stop plates on the top and bottom the gate, the vertical part of the gate frame. Here's what the strap looks like cleaned up. Just brushed all the top of the welds, and then smoothed the corners. Used a flat disc to clean up the edges. And then brush this under there as best we could. And then brush the welds on top. So that is ready for some tape and paint. The welds are cold now. Over here on the support arm bracket and the front actuator arm bracket, and I can go ahead and tape them off and paint them. So I want to go ahead and get this painted before I get the arm on, and get that painted, and then get this painted over here as well too. This has got to cool down, but man, that powder coating really contaminates the weld. But I smoothed the weld off on the back over here, and they can use some filler, and if they want to use some filler up here as well too. And then I just put a little bead on the front, and then just smoothed it off just in case somebody does, walk by. That's why I put it on the gate as opposed to the latch post. It's always standing there, and it could get caught on somebody's clothes if they decide to walk through this, even though it's a vehicle gate, not a pedestrian gate. So I've got that cleaned up and ready to go, and just needs a little bit of tape and paint, and we'll start back over here on the actuator cable. I'll go ahead and make my splice for my actuator cable now, if I can. I wasn't planning on giving it very much of a service loop, just a few inches, so it might not be able to rest on the ground and make the connection at the same time. We'll just have to see. I made the connections for the actuator arm, and I already had the photo eye done, and I just went black to black, red to white, so I know that black's the same. So when I go over to install the photo eye and the control board, if I get black right, I'll obviously get white right. See, I made all the connections. Got the motor power, and then I've got the limits. I put the Dolphin is brand name, but B connectors, this insulation displacement connector. I cut the ends off just a tad bit. I don't cut any of the metal, just the plastic part, and then that allows me to actually fit the insulation of the cables in there. I have a Instagram picture of what it looks like between when they come from the factory, and then after I modify them. I'll put the link in the description down below, and you can see that I've added 2 sets of strain relief. One to prevent the cable from getting pulled out like that, and then the other one cable to cable. so they can support each other. And you'll notice that I used a 3/4 inch box. That's 3/4 inch conduit, and I bought a deeper box than just a normal single gang box, so that fits in there perfectly without any stress, and that'll give you plenty of service if you have to work on it. And the amount of service was determined by how I could actually set it on the ground and still have a little slack in the cable. So that's the only gauge that I was using to determine that. That way, when you do have to work on the arm or service it in any capacity, you can take it off the support bracket, set it on the ground, and still not have to disconnect the wires. So you'll have a little bit hanging down. Well, I got a little overconfident, I guess, and cut too much off of the bracket for the photo eye reflector. So I'll have to tack weld that back on. Actually, kind of glad that happened. I went ahead and welded the piece back on that I cut off, and then cut it off to length, give it just a little protection for the photo eye. But I added 3-inch reflector as opposed to that little crummy one, and a hood. And I'll take that tape off here in a second. But as you can see, it's aligned. It's broke. The line is broke. Okay, so that gets our photo eye taken care of. I just set up the limits, holding the set open and set closed, I think for about 10-15 seconds. It'll beep at you a couple times, and then you just use these to move the gate. And then once you get it set in the open position, you hit set open, and then set close will be flashing. And then once you get it in the closed position, then by moving the gate forward or backward, you hit set close, and then it's set. And then you can use the commands that are on the control board to open and close it. Still got to tighten down the bolts, but it's okay temporarily to be like that. And you can see that I went past 90 a little bit, but I've still got a good angle on the arm, so I got plenty of clearance. So this is the frustrating part with how the actuator arm is set up, is that in order to get the angle right on the arm, you have to cut that notch out. For the arm to be able to close. Now I get the angle and the position and all that. That's no problem. I understand that, but you know, you gotta have some provision for the arm to be on a 4-inch post, because here in Texas that's the most common size post. So you can see we've got it nice and straight and level, and now we'll just tighten up the bolts and program the remotes. I've got to install the keypad too. And then we'll be looking good. You can see that we got the conduit painted, and it looks pretty nice. It's a little bit more red than I thought, but I was just picking it out. It was not something that the customer requested and didn't pay for, actually, but it wasn't his fault. We should have let him know that we were going to run actually we weren't going to run conduit. The way that the original specs on it was just to run the wire over to that, so he actually didn't have the conduit in the contract either, but that's the way to do it right. And then you can see that the conduit goes under the sod, up the post, and then the box has been painted as well too. So we're going to do some cleanup and program the remotes, install the keypad, program the keypad, tighten up the bolts, and then clean up. You can see that there's still some contaminants left over from the welding, and all of that will be cleaned up by the people who come back and actually do the paint. But for now, for the holidays, we'll be able to at least get by with this paint color, which is a primer and a paint. It's not a great match, but it does the trick. So the other thing is we painted the conduit that goes up and down the wall as well too. we had painted the existing conduit, and then we painted our conduit as well, so it blends pretty well. Once the sun hits it and beats on it for a little while, gets a little dirt and debris, it'll blend a little bit better. So we also hooked up the photo eye. We upgraded to a 3-inch round reflector, which gives us a little bit better range, a little bit more versatility. But you can see that it's hooked up. As soon as I break it, the gate stops and opens back up. So that will help as a safety device if there's anything blocking the beam, path of the gate, or if anything blocks it while it is closing, it'll activate the gate and tell it to open back up.